I thank the Speaker. We just heard a few moments ago a colleague of mine, of ours, I should say, Congressman Charlie Dent, who has served with great distinction and honor, a classmate of mine. And I simply want to say that he is a role model for all of us in terms of how to legislate in a thoughtful and deliberative fashion and to reach across the aisle in a way that I think is conducive to getting things done. And he certainly is a great example of how we should all reflect in terms of our work here every day. We will miss him. We wish him the best of luck in his next endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the challenges that we face in California as it relates to our water needs. The San Joaquin Valley that I have the honor and privilege to represent is one of the largest agricultural regions in the entire country and therefore the world. We grow half the nation's fruits and vegetables. 70% of the world's almonds, 50% of the world's pistachios, the #1 dairy state in the nation and the #1 citrus state in the nation. And the list goes on and on and on. Over 300 commodities that we have the ability to grow because of an incredible Mediterranean climate. And water, which is the crucible, because we like to say in the valley that where water flows, food grows. And clearly the ability to have water reliability is so essential to ensuring that we can continue to maintain our agricultural production, which every night puts food on America's dinner table and therefore allows American consumers to have the healthiest, the best nutritious quality of varieties of food and food products at the most economical cost to them and their families anywhere in the world. And we're so good at it in producing food not only in California but around the world, around the country, American agriculture, that I think sometimes Americans take it for granted, because less than 3% of our nation's population, as in California, less than 3% of our state's population, is directly involved in the production of food and fiber. And so I sometimes feel that the majority of Americans believe that their food comes from a grocery store. Well, it doesn't. I mean, you get it at the grocery store, or you get it at your favorite restaurants, wherever that may be. But before that food gets to the grocery store, or before it gets to those restaurants, it comes from farmers and ranchers and dairymen and women across this great land of ours. And certainly California plays a key role. We've had difficult drought periods in California. We had a 6-year prolonged drought that reminded us that the climate continues to change, and what impacts we as people have on the change of that climate is debated, but clearly we know that we have an impact and it continues to change. And therefore, to be responsible, we have to plan to ensure that we have adequate water supplies to maintain our agricultural production, for it is the sustenance of life. Water. Where water flows, food grows. It is so important, obviously, throughout the country, but critical in maintaining our incredible cornucopia of agricultural production in California. For you should understand that 99% of our agriculture in California is irrigated. And so I have, for over 30 years, worked to strengthen the water reliability, not only in the San Joaquin Valley, but throughout California. Because in a state like California, where we have so many resources and so many cutting-edge technologies in terms of efficient irrigation methodologies, drip irrigation, conserving and trying to figure out ways in which we can recharge our aquifers, we're using all the water tools in the water toolbox. When I was in the California legislature, I authored legislation to create the Kern County Water Bank, led two successful water bond measures that provided funding to provide more than $2 billion to improve California's water system, provide for safe and reliable water drinking. We have places in California and other parts of the country where our groundwater has gotten contaminated, and therefore we need to make adjustments to ensure that every American, every Californian has clean drinking water. In Congress, I've secured approval for the Madera Irrigation District Water Bank, the San Luis Intertie, the North Valley Regional Recycled Water Project, bringing hundreds and thousands of acre feet to secure more water, a more reliable supply of water for our San Joaquin Valley, but also for other parts of California as well. For if we cannot solve the water problems in California, I really am very concerned about the future of our nation and our planet. For, again, we don't think about it, but food is a national security issue. It truly is. We take it for granted. But we not only have the ability throughout the country and in California to produce enough food for every American, but we produce more than we can consume, and therefore we export many of our food products throughout the world. But again, with the impacts of climate change, oceans rising, the planet that 2 years ago clicked 7 billion people, by the middle of the century we'll have 9 billion people. And guess what happens when you add 2 billion more people to the planet? You got to feed them. And therefore, food not only for America, but for the world is a national security issue. But you can't have that abundant supply of food, that reliable supply of food, unless you have a reliable supply of water. Let me give you some perspective. 200 years ago, we had 1.7 billion people on the planet. So in 200 years, we've gone from 1.7 to 7 billion, and by the middle of the century, it's estimated there will be 9 billion people on the planet that, yes, will need food. And only if we have reliable water supplies can we ensure that we have that reliable supply of food. And if we can't figure out ways in which to manage our water resources in California, the 5th largest economy now in the world, a cutting-edge state in technology, if we can't solve our water problems in California, I'm truly concerned about other parts of the world that depend upon a reliable water supply to feed their population. So throughout the years that I've been both here and in Sacramento, I've worked on a bipartisan basis to pass water infrastructure improvements for our nation. The WIN Act that we passed some 2 years ago was signed into law in December of 2016. It was a part of an overall effort to provide solutions using all the water tools in our water toolbox that will make it more flexible to move water through California's system of waterways, the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta system, in which we can have the flexibility but still try to deal with the environmental concerns and maintain water quality for our cities, but also provide water for our farmers. In addition to that, provided the state over $355 million for water infrastructure projects, including matching federal funds for new surface storage in California, for the Temperance Flat project, for raising San Luis Reservoir, for creating the Sites Reservoir, and for other important funding purposes in which a federal authorization will allow us to match both state and local dollars. In all of my time in working to improve the lives of the people of the Valley that I have the honor and privilege to represent, rarely have I presented with a project that has such obvious potential as the new Exchequer Dam that was built a number of years ago. The water that is currently impounded, actually it's a dam that was built in the 20s and then expanded in the late 50s, provides irrigation for an incredible amount of productive ag land in Merced County. It also allows for groundwater replenishment in many of the nearby communities. And it also provides environmental benefits for fisheries, wildlife refuges downstream from the dam. Recently, the Merced Irrigation District performed a detailed analysis of the hydrology of the watershed upstream from Exchequer Dam, which is the mountains that California has been blessed with, the incredible Sierra Nevada mountain range, over 600 miles in length, 150 miles of width, mountains that go to 12 to 14,000 feet, that provides the snowpack for California. It's Mother Nature's icebox for California. For those of you who are not from California should understand, we get all of our moisture in California from November to March. And above 4,000 or 5,000 feet, that rain turns to snow. And then in the springtime, it melts and it comes down and it fills our rivers and the reservoirs that we have on our rivers. And it allows us to have a supply of water throughout the summer. We don't have any rain in the summer. Recently, this project, as an example, was determined by the district, the Merced Irrigation District, that if we raise the spillway gates by 8 feet, that Lake McClure behind this dam could add an additional 57,000 acre feet of water. 57,000 acre feet of water is a good additional supply without impeding Merced's wild and scenic river designation. So we maintain that, but at the same time we add 57,000 acre feet of water to the supply. That's important. However, to move forward with raising these spillway gates, the flood control and operations manual for Exchequer Dam must be updated, and that's the responsibility of the Army Corps of Engineers. You should understand that many of these water projects in California and other states across the country have multiple purposes. They not only supply water for people, they not only try to benefit the environment, but they also provide water for farmers. And at the same time, many of these projects provide hydroelectric power, and they provide flood control protection. So in this case, when you increase the spillway gates 8 feet, the Army Corps of Engineers has to modify the flood control manual so that when we have heavy storms and rains, as we did a year ago in California, we're able to operate the facility in such a way that also provides flood control protection. Unfortunately, the current manual that is in place was from 1959 when the dam was expanded the second time. The Army Corps of Engineers policy requires that flood control manuals be updated, therefore then to reflect the new data in the changes of the project that would occur as a result of raising these gates. In 2017, the Merced Irrigation District wrote the Army Corps of Engineers requesting a revision of the flood control manual. And that's what this legislation that we are introducing will work on. The Army Corps indicated they could not update the manual at the time, citing budgetary constraints. The Merced Irrigation District proposed to pay for the public process to update the flood control manual, to incorporate this new hydrological data, if in fact the gates were raised. The Army Corps responded by saying it didn't have the legal authority to accept funds for the purpose of a non-federal Section 7 project like this new Exchequer Dam, despite being able to do so for other Army Corps facilities. Thus, the Non-Federal Reservoir Operations Improvement Act, legislation that I've introduced, would resolve this disparity by allowing the owners of a non-federal reservoir, in this case the Merced Irrigation District, that are regulated by the Army Corps to provide protection for flood control, to contribute the funds so that we can update the manual, so that we can in fact raise the gates 8 feet, which the Merced Irrigation District is going to pay for, along with their water users. That's how they pay for it, and as well as paying the Army Corps of Engineers to update the flood control manual. Now, this sounds like a lot of common sense, doesn't it? I think so. And so that's the purpose of this legislation. It's part of a long effort that I've been engaged in to improve the water supply, the water reliability, the water quality, the environmental benefits for the challenges that we face in California as it relates to maintaining the water needs for a state that has 40 million people, the 5th largest economy in the country, the #1 agricultural state in the nation. And so we know that with the growing demands, the competing demands on water, that crucible, that critical, absolute must resource to ensure that we can survive as people, so that we can, where water flows, food will grow, that we can maintain the ability as a national security issue to ensure that all Americans have the kind of sustainable, good quality, nutritious food that is so critical to our diet and to our well-being. So that's really what this is all about. This is a local project, but it's a part of a much larger effort that I have been engaged in with my colleagues on a bipartisan basis to address the needs, the long-term needs of California's water supply. And that's what's at heart here. So we'll continue to work together. I hope that this legislation will be enacted this year so that the Merced Irrigation District can be able to go ahead and plan and construct the increase of water supply for the needs of the people of Merced County and the surrounding area that will have a multitude of benefits. This is a part of an overall effort that I will continue to be engaged in Merced County, in Madera County, and in Fresno County, throughout our valley and throughout our state, to ensure that in the long term, in the 21st century, we can count on the fact that we have a long-term water supply for all Californians that will allow us to continue to maintain our agriculture economy and at the same time provide water for people who live in the cities, improve our water quality, and to ensure at the same time that we protect the environment. Those are the goals. It's complicated, it's complex, and it's never easy. Mark Twain supposedly was credited with over 100 years ago saying, having spent some time in the West, that it was clear to him that when we talk about water and water resources and the incredible demands on those water resources, 100 years ago, supposedly Mark Twain said that in the West it was clear to him that whiskey was made for drinking and water was made for fighting. We hope that we won't fight over our water resources, but that we'll work together on a bipartisan basis to solve these problems. That's what we are sent here to do, to work together on a bipartisan basis to solve a whole host of issues that we deal with. But it's very important that we focus in this instance on this legislation with passing a bill that makes a great deal of common sense. I yield back the balance of my time.